Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about propagating the oh so sought after Monstera albo. I'm going to be working with a node today. So here are the materials that I have that I'm going to be using for my terrarium style propagation setup. I have some sphagnum moss, some perlite, and some horticultural charcoal. And if you notice, I'm actually soaking the sphagnum moss and the perlite in some distilled water. That's not really necessary, but the only reason why I'm using distilled water is because our water in this area is kind of harsh, and I kind of didn't want that to be a negative factor or mess up any root development. So here is what I'm going to be putting everything in. I have just, a regular sized orchid pot. The reason why I'm using an orchid pot is it's kind of all I had, and also I just figured the drainage would kind of be really good for it. And here is the housing that I'm going to essentially put everything in there and then kind of close it up. I just got this at Walmart. It's kind of just like I guess a sugar or a flour container, and then it has a little top that'll just kind of enclose everything. And I guess idea of it all is it's going to create a greenhouse effect. So first you're going to want to put your perlite in there and make sure you're not getting any excess water in the pot, because you don't want there to be too much moisture. Some moisture is good, but you don't want too much. So kind of just put a thin layer of some perlite on the bottom, and let's see if that's enough. Maybe just a little bit more. So I've kind of this is all an experiment. I've never done this before. I just did a bunch of research, kind of watched a bunch of different YouTube videos on how to propagate and how to kind of get wet sticks to root. And I kind of just took bits and pieces and kind of things that I liked about different videos and different people. So hopefully it works. That seems like a good amount of perlite. So I have soaked perlite on the bottom of this pot, which is going to help add some moisture. And then I'm going to be layering some dry horticultural charcoal. This is kind of just going to act as like a barrier for just any bad bacteria that has gotten in there, and it's going to soak it right up. So you're going to want to have a layer of that. And again, in doing my research, a lot of terrarium setups actually suggested to use horticultural charcoal. It kind of helps just soak up impurities, and hopefully it helps kind of deter any root rot that's potentially going to develop. So you want to put a decent amount. I should have probably got a bigger spoon. Maybe that seems like maybe just a couple more scoops. Okay, I'm going to shake it around. That looks good. I feel like that's a good amount. So with the sphagnum moss, you're going to want to just obviously soak it for a little bit so it can kind of retain a little bit of moisture. So you're going to want to take some of the sphagnum moss and squeeze the excess moisture out. And the reason for that is because you want it to be damp, not too wet, because if you have too much water, it'll actually kind of rot the ends of the wet stick. So you're going to want to grab a little bit of sphagnum moss, squeeze it out like a sponge, and when you're putting it in on top of the horticultural charcoal, I cannot say that word, horticultural charcoal, you want to put it in really loosely. That way, when there is root development, the roots aren't going to have that much resistance because they're still going to be juvenile roots. So once you put the last bit of sphagnum moss on the top, again, you don't want to like push it down because it's going to compact the medium. So there you go. There you have it. There is the final product. And my little doggy's in the background taking a nap. So I have that, and then you're just going to place, so when you're placing the wet stick on the sphagnum moss, you kind of want to push or point it down to where the aerial roots are kind of growing down or going that way. So here's another one. So actually it's a little more compact than I liked. So let's take some out. All those pretty little albo wet sticks just hanging out there. Hopefully my research and theory kind of pays off. So after they're all kind of resting on top of the moss, you're gonna want to, sorry, I'm being really, really picky about this. And you're just gonna wanna place it into the housing and then put the lid on top, and then hopefully it'll just let it do its thing. There it is. So here's the final setup that I have. It's actually sitting right beside a south-facing window. The terrarium housing is on top of a heating pad. I have a temperature probe inside the soil, and I will keep y'all posted. Fingers crossed.